Hi everyone. So in this video we are going to cover unit 2, and unit 2 talk about the policies, and it also talks about food security and nutritional concerns. In this video I'm planning to cover the definition for food security. We'll be seeing the definition for food security. We'll be talking about the PDS system, which is public distribution system. We are going to talk about NFSA Act of 2013. Then we are also going to talk about little bit about the Manrega Act, right, and how it links to food security. And in the end, we are going to talk about what are the reasons for the undernutrition concerns that we have in India, right? So these are the topics that I'm taking up in this particular video. So let us start with the definition of food security. What exactly is food security and what do we mean by it? So, food security is one of the most debated concepts, like we all know, right? Food security has approximately 200 definitions, right? And 450 indicators by which we can define food security, right? It has 450 indicators or parameters, we can say, right? And it is a very multi-dimensional concept. Okay. Next, moving on, the most widely accepted definition is from the World Food Conference, which was held in 1996, and it says that food security exists when all people at all times have physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food. Okay. So we have to have physical access, we have to have social access, and economic access to sufficient. Not that कि मेरे पास बस एक amount of food, and no, I want it to be sufficient amount, that is enough. ठीक है. It should be safe and it should be nutritious food. That meets their dietary needs, whatever dietary needs people have, and food preferences for an active and healthy lifestyle. So this is what is the definition of food security. When all people at all times have physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food. So you'll all remember the definition of food security. This is very important. Okay. Now this definition gives us four dimensions. It talks about four dimensions which are very important to understand. The first dimension is availability, second is accessibility, third is utilization, and fourth is absorption. So let us talk about them one by one. So availability means that whether sufficient food is physically present or not in our country, and availability talks about whether we are producing enough, whether we are importing if not producing, and whether we are keeping stocks in our country or not. So availability में हमारे पास production, imports and stocks ये तीनों components आ जाते हैं. ठीक है. So food should be physically present in the country at all times. Then we have accessibility, which means that whether people can actually reach and afford. So the two main important words here are reach and afford the food that is available. So सिर्फ फूड के अवेलेबल होने से कुछ नहीं होता. इफ फूड इज अवेलेबल बट इफ इट इज नॉट एक्सेसिबल टू मी, सबके पास फूड की एक्सेसिबिलिटी होनी चाहिए. ठीक है. पीपल शुड हैव रीच टू फूड एंड वो अफोर्ड कर सकें फूड को. ठीक है. सो अ पर्सन मे लिव इन अ कंट्री विद सरप्लस फूड बट स्टिल गो हंग्री इफ दे कैन नॉट अफोर्ड इट, राइट? What happens in India is not that we don't have surplus food here, but still people cannot afford it. So accessibility is a problem in India. Then moving on with utilization. So utilization is whether the body can actually use the food consumed. So if I give my people in my country pizza to eat daily, this is that I'm providing them food. I'm making food accessible for them. Okay, food is accessible to them, they can also afford food, but can their body actually use the food that they have consumed? This is what utilization means. So हमें ऐसा फूड अवेलेबल कराना है, एक्सेसिबल करवाना है पब्लिक को, जो जब वो कंज्यूम करें तो उनकी बॉडी उसे यूज कर पाए. ठीक है. सो this depends on dietary diversity, cooking practices, hygiene, and intra household food distribution. So food should be made available, but it should be the food that when you consume your body can actually make use of it. Okay. And lastly we have absorption, which means that whether the body absorbs nutrients effectively. So the same logic again, that whatever food we eat, our body should be able to absorb its nutrients effectively. Agar food में is carbohydrate rich, so body should absorb all the carbohydrate. If it is protein rich, then body should absorb all the protein in it, right? So this is what we mean when we talk about absorption. Okay. This four dimensional framework is critical because India's food security problem is not primarily about availability. Because, like we mentioned, we have availability completed with us because we produce enough. Okay? We produce also, we export also to the rest of the world. So our weak pillars are accessibility, utilization, and absorption. Our weak pillar is not availability because we have food available in the world. See what is written here. India is the third largest food producer in the world. So we have enough food, but it's just that it is not accessible. People cannot utilize it and their bodies can't absorb the nutrients available, right? Then come to a very important concept that I want to discuss with you. This is the entitlement theory given by Amartya Sen, right? So he says that famine and hunger are not always caused by food shortage. So it is not necessarily that necessary that droughts will happen and famines will happen only when there is food shortage. No, they are caused by the failure of people's entitlements, because people are not entitled, right, to food, which means their ability to command food through income, production, or legal rights. So people have not been given enough legal rights, right? They don't have enough income, and they don't have access to direct production, and that is the reason that they are not entitled to food. Okay, they don't have the ability to command food. Okay, and how can you command food? You can command food through income, production, and legal rights, and people don't have that entitlement with them. Okay, so we have an example here that the Bengal famine of 1943 is a very good example, because approximately 3.8 million people died, not because there was no food in Bengal, but because people lost their entitlement to food through loss of wages. So there was loss of wages. Okay, people did not have enough wages. Then we had rising price, so there was a price increase suddenly, and then colonial mismanagement. It was a period when the Britishers were ruling us, so it was a period of colonial mismanagement. So see, the Bengal famine of 1943 also gives us the same logic that we have been discussing here, that 3.8 million people died, but there was food available, but availability was not an issue. What was the issue? Because people lost their entitlement to food, because they had no wages, the prices were rising, and there was a lot of mismanagement, right? So moving ahead, this is why we write here that agricultural productivity growth cannot alone solve undernutrition. This can't solve the problem of undernutrition. Okay, if people don't have enough income and legal right or institutional access so that they can claim food, then production growth will do no help to them. Right, now let's talk about India's problem. What is India's issue? Why is India facing this problem? So we know that all crop output grew at 2.7% per annum post independence. This we have seen, like post 1947 our growth was 2.7% per annum, right, in all crop, right? So India shifted from being a food deficit country. We know we were under the American PL 480 food scheme, and then we became a food grain exporter also, right? But still, the United Nations has reported in 2022 that global hunger numbers rose to as many as 828 million people. So the global hunger numbers, it's not just India's number, it's a number that we see globally. Okay, this is 821 million people, and India also contributes to this number a lot, right? So we have a lot of undernourished population in India. And what does the Swaminathan Commission of 2006 suggests? They documented that in the period of 1999 to 2000, 77% of the rural India, okay, the population living in rural area was consuming below 2400 kilocalories per day, which is the threshold below which a person is considered to be below the poverty line of India, right? So this is the threshold below which agar isse kam you consume, then you are considered to be below the poverty line in India. So but 77% population was consuming this number only, 2400 kilocalories per day, which is considered to be very less, right? The SDG target of zero hunger, okay, by 2030, we had declared this, that by 2030 we will achieve zero hunger in India, which is our one of the our SDGs, right? But right now it seems impossible to achieve this, okay, given the current trends in India. Now let's move ahead and talk about the public distribution system, which is the most important thing for us to discuss, right? So the public distribution system is not a post independence creation. It started when during the World War II, and it was a wartime rationing measure, which means that during the time of war, this was a measure by which we used to ration, right? So we used to provide food under the PDS system during the World War II. So this was started using by the Britishers only. This is not something that India has started after independence, right? So after the war, it was extended to all the urban areas, and the reason it was extended to India's urban areas was because we wanted to control the issue of high inflation. Why high inflation exists in the first place? Because there is a lot of demand, but there is not much supply. So there is a demand supply mismatch, and that is why the prices go up really high. So to in order to maintain the supply and to control high inflation, the PDS system was continued in the urban areas of India, right? So when India became independent, policymakers decided that they will continue this system, and we had the issue of chronic hunger. We were left with a very undernourished population, right? So we wanted to ensure that nobody dies out of hunger, and that is why we continued the PDS system, right? So let's take the timeline of 1960s. What happened during 1960s? PDS used to function as a primary price support program for all the consumers in India. So it acted as a price support program, and its main purpose was price stabilization. We did not want the prices to go high a lot so that the our people cannot afford it. So it was to maintain price stability, and to act as a force against private traders who try to exploit food scarcity situations. So we know that when the supply is not that much, some people start hoarding up stocks with them, right? And then they sell it at a very high price. So these are the people who exploit our population, our people. When they see that there is a scarcity situation happening in a country, they know that this country is going through a scarcity situation. So at that time they charge you a very high price, because they know that you are in a need of a lot of food, you're demanding a lot of food. So this was the reason that PDS continued, and it acted as a price stabilization measure at that time. Then, in the period of 1980, we extended this coverage of PDS to the rural areas in India also, as a part of welfare programs by the state. And the sixth 5 year plan, which was from the year 1980 to 1985, it predicted that PDS will become a stable and permanent features of India's strategy to control prices and to reduce fluctuations and achieve equitable distribution of all the essential consumer goods. So the sixth 5 year plan said that the PDS in some time is going to prove to become a strategy for India, by which we will be able to control the rising prices, and we will be able to control fluctuations and ensure that there is an equal distribution of all the essential goods that our people require, right? And then we can see that by 1985 this was extended to all the tribal blocks also, which was covering approximately 51 million people. And after 1985 we had the revamped public distribution system, also known as RPDS. This was revamped public distribution system, this was introduced, right? And then we extended our coverage to 164 million people living in the rural areas, and shifted from urban rationing model to a rural and remote centric operation. So as we can see that earlier we used to operate only in the urban areas. This started as only functioning in the urban areas to control inflation, right? But in the revamped public distribution system, we introduced it to the rural areas also. Then in 1992 this revamped PDS started targeting remote, hilly and tribal and all the drought prone areas that had been previously excluded. Then in 1997 what happened, that we had the introduction of targeted public distribution system, or TPDS, right? So this was to replace the universal coverage, right? So the population was now divided into two. So we had BPL, which is below poverty line, and then we had APL, which is above poverty line. So our population was divided into BPL and APL, and they had different issue price. So basically, BPL, the people living in under the poverty line, below poverty line, they would be charged a different issue price, and the people living above poverty line would be charged a different issue prices. So we did not keep the same issue prices for both these set of people. We changed it, right? So it came up with different issue prices. And then during the period of 2001 and 2002, the criteria for issuing ration cards became that it would be based on annual family income. So then we started looking at the annual family income, and then we used to issue ration cards, right? Then in 2013, finally, we had the National Food Security Act coming up, which transformed the PDS system somehow, and we'll look at it in just some time. Right now, let us discuss how the PDS actually works. So, what happens is the Food Corporation of India, that we have already studied, what it does is that it procures food grains from farmers, right? We know that the job of Food Corporation of India is to procure food grains for farmers, and at what price? At minimum support price, which is our MSP. So, it procures grains from the farmers directly at the minimum support price, and stocks also them in the government warehouses. So we have one job to do, that we have to procure food grains from the farmers at MSP, and we have to stock it at the government warehouses. Then the second step is that what we look at is that the central government will allocate these stocks to state government, right? And what will be the criteria to allocate? The criteria would be population and poverty estimates. So the central government will look at the population of a state and look at the poverty level of the state, and then allocate based on these numbers. Then the state government will distribute the stock that the central government has sent it through a network of fair prices shop, or also called as ration shops, right? So you have to get yourself made a card. Okay, this card is your ration card, so you can take this card with you to the fair price shops, and they will give you your subsidized food grains. Okay, so what all is covered under the PDS system? We have, not everything is covered under the PDS system, right? So we have rice, wheat, sugar, edible oil, and kerosene. So these are basic essentials: rice, wheat, sugar, edible oil, and kerosene, and only these are provided under the PDS system, right? And also you can read this point that the food subsidy involved in the PDS system, this has increased a lot. So earlier it was only 3000 something crores in 1974-75, and right now it is 9000 crores when we talk about the period of 1998-1999. So this shows that the government is giving providing a lot of subsidy to the PDS system, right? Now let us talk about the achievements of PDS system really quick. So the PDS system is acting as a force against all the private traders, and whoever can manipulate the market, we are acting as a force against them, right? Then the second point is that it will prevent extreme price spikes. Like we saw, it can maintain price stability in the market. That is why we continued the PDS system. So it will prevent extreme price spikes. We will see price stability. Then whenever there will be drought or supply shortfall, right? Because only at these time we see that the prices go really up whenever there is a drought or a lack of supply, right? We will see that this price stabilization will benefit those who do not directly access PDS. So even if you do not directly take the advantages of PDS, you do not benefit out of it, still you will be benefited indirectly by it, because this is actually controlling inflation in the economy by not letting prices fluctuate a lot, right? So even those who are not under this scheme will get benefited out of it. Then because this is a poverty alleviation tool, so what we see is that the subsidized food grains reduce family food expenditure, right? So if there is a poor household, their expenditure on food is reduced because food is subsidized for them. They get food at a very subsidized rate, so they can redirect their income to other essential needs, right? So if I have to spend less on my food, then I can redirect that money on education or on health, right? So this helps them to redirect their money to other important essential needs, right? Then 26% of India's population right now is living below the poverty line. So then PDS becomes a very important strategy for them. And in terms of geographical reach, PDS, how has it helped us? Because it has been a very massive institutional infrastructure for us of fair price shops across all the urban and rural areas. So it covers all the urban and rural areas in India. And the revamped PDS also addresses remote, tribal, and hill areas, right? Like we earlier saw. And this is important, that during COVID-19 what happened, that PDS system was merged with Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana. And under this scheme, what used to happen, that people used to get subsidized benefit of 5 kg of rice and 1 kg of pulses, right? So to all the beneficiary, we provided 5 kg of rice and 1 kg of pulses. So this helped us to prevent a food crisis during the lockdown period, right? Because people were not earning that much, so there could be a situation of food crisis. But PDS system, along with this scheme of Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, helped us to negate this issue, right? So here are the failures and limitations of PDS. I will share this with you on Telegram, and you can just read through it. This is not very important for us, right? Let's talk about wheat and rice bias, because I feel this is important to discuss. This means that under the PDS system, what used to happen, that it only focused on wheat and rice. Only these two commodities were taken care of, because only these two commodities were supported under the minimum support price program, right? So this has a very negative consequence for us, because firstly, beneficiaries only received your caloric staples, so their nutritional requirements were not completely taken care of. Because if you only receive rice and wheat at a subsidized rate, this is not going to fulfill all your nutritional requirements, right? So this is just working as a form of giving you enough calories for you to survive, but this is not enough for you to achieve a nutritional level. So this was one of the biggest demerits of PDS, as we can see, because PDS did not cover any pulses or millets or vegetables or fruit, right? So if you're entirely dependent on PDS for your food consumption, then you're going to be having a very nutritionally inadequate diet, because PDS is not covering any of these, right? So this was one of the biggest demerits of the PDS system. So we saw that India had a lot of caloric insufficiency, right? Because we had protein deficiency in our country, we had anemia, which means that people had low iron levels, we saw stunting, and we also saw other micronutrient deficiencies. Then, like I already said, your MSP plus your PDS system only incentivizes your farmers to grow wheat and rice, right? Because only wheat and rice is covered under your minimum support price, right? Only wheat and rice is covered. So farmers focused on growing only these two crops, and they did not focus on any other crop, right? Now let's talk about the National Food Security Act really quick, because this also played a huge role in maintaining India's food security, right? So, because of the National Food Security Act of 2013, food became a legal entitlement, right? So, people were legally entitled to food, and it was not limited to being a welfare scheme because people were then legally entitled to food, right? So, earlier what happened that before NFSA, if a person was denied their PDS quota, they had no legal route to go. But after the introduction of National Food Security Act of 2013, if you were denied of your PDS quota, you could go approach the court and you would be covered under some legal security. So what were the key provisions of NFSA? Let us discuss that really quickly. So first is that NFSA covered 75% of the rural population and 50% of the urban population, and this means that roughly speaking it covered 67% of India's total population, right? Which is a lot of people. This is 800 million people. So we see that the coverage under the National Food Security Act is much larger than the PDS, right? And everybody was entitled to 5 kg of food grains per month, right? Which was at a very subsidized price, because the price for rice was rupees 3 per kg, for wheat it was rupees 2 per kg, and for coarse grains it was rupees 1 per kg. So it was provided at very subsidized prices to people. Okay. Then it also had special provisions for pregnant women, lactating mothers, and all the small children, because NFSA realized that their nutritional needs of all the people across all life stages is very different. So these were the key provisions of the NFSA. Then moving ahead and talking about the shortcomings of NFSA is the same that the shortcomings of PDS were, that it also focused on wheat and rice only, like the old PDS system. It did not mandate the inclusion of pulses, millets, or vegetables like we talked about earlier. And then we say here that malnutrition, the issue of malnutrition in India is not just because of the inadequate food intake. This is one of the reason, right? But this is not entirely the reason. We also have the issue of poor sanitation, lack of clean drinking water, and inadequate healthcare, plus poor feeding practices to our children. So we have other issues also, and it is coupled with your focus only on rice and wheat by these policies, right? Then let's talk about Manrega and its link with food and nutrition security. It has no direct link as such with food and nutrition security in India, but we'll just quickly discuss the Manrega. The Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act was enacted in 2005, and it was implemented from 2006. And what it guarantees is that you will have 100 days of wage employment per year. ठीक है, 100 days of guaranteed work. It is guaranteeing you 100 days of wage employment to every rural household, ठीक है, whose adult members are willing to do unskilled manual work. So there is no skilled work that is there is unskilled work and it is manual work. So in every household, whoever is an adult, they are willing to work under Manrega, they can, right? So why do we say that it is linked with food security? Because primarily this is an employment and income program, not a food security program, right? But it has connection to food security, because when we are providing guaranteed wage income to all the rural households, this increases their purchasing power of food. When people will have income, they will have access to food, right? Accessibility is there for them. So households, whoever will participate in Manrega, will have a stable and predictable income with them, right? And even during the agricultural seasons, when there is very high food insecurity, then also they will have income in their hands and they can have access to food. So this income that they get under Manrega, this translates into improved dietary diversity, right? So they can consume a lot of whole variety of food and not just be limited to a certain kind of cereal, right? So Manrega improves that quality of life that they are currently living in, okay? So this is very important. So finally, we are back to our question that why undernutrition persists despite all these policies that we have. So we saw the PDS system, we also saw NFSA, right? We also saw the Manrega Act. So we have a lot of other policies, bunch of other policies apart from these. But why is it that undernutrition is still such a big issue in India? So let us discuss about that. So our policies are focused on availability, like we talked about even in the beginning of the chapter, that our focus has been on availability and that we achieve through production, agricultural production. So availability is not an issue for us. What is our issue? Our issue is utilization and absorption, okay? This remains unaddressed. So we talked about utilization and absorption. What are these? These are that even if food is made accessible to you, So there is availability, there is accessibility. But if the food is not impacting your body directly, it is not impacting your health directly in a good way, then we still have a problem. So utilization and absorption of food into the body is still a very huge issue in India. And what we see here is that utilization failures happen because when food is available and accessible, like we said, households do not consume nutritionally adequate diets because they don't have enough knowledge about the nutritional requirements of their body. Okay, they use poor food preparation practices, and we only consume very monotonous diets that fail to provide the necessary micronutrients that our body needs. So as you'll see in a lot of Indian households, still we have a very fixed pattern of eating food. So for example, in lunch, in all the households, you'll see at a daily basis you'll have dal, you'll have rice with you, you will have chapati, right? So this is a very monotonous diet that we have. We don't couple it with salads, for example, or we do not include enough protein in our diet. So right now, of course, people are being more aware about it. But if we talk about rural India, there is, like we've mentioned here, there is poor food preparation practices that are taking places. We also have monotonous diets. We do not change our diet a lot, and this is an issue because we fail to provide our body the necessary micronutrients that it needs, right? And why do we have absorption failures? If we talk about that, it happens because repeated infections caused by poor sanitation, like we see in rural areas, we have poor sanitation and unsafe water supply is there, but it is not safe to use, right? So this destroys all the nutrients even before they are consumed, right? So absorption failures mean that even if we have food availability with us and we can access food also, but we have poor sanitation in a lot of areas and we have unsafe water, for example, so this is going to destroy all the nutrients even before we have consumed it. Okay, so this is a very important point. And look here, I've mentioned the problem of hidden hunger. What is the problem of hidden hunger talking about? It refers to micronutrient deficiency, the problem of hidden hunger. So India has a lot of deficiencies. First is iron deficiency. You will meet a lot of people in India who will have iron deficiency, which causes anemia. Then we have iodine deficiency, which causes a lot of thyroid disorders, right? Then we have vitamin A deficiency. This is the third deficiency which is found in India at a very large scale. So this also causes blindness, right? And we have zinc deficiency in India, which is also at a very large scale. So this causes growth retardation, like you don't achieve a certain kind of growth that is required at your age. And then we have folate deficiencies, which causes birth defects at birth, right? So these deficiencies are not addressed by distributing wheat and rice. If we only keep on focusing on wheat and rice, who will take care of all these deficiencies that our people have, right? So this is very important. Then it is also important to understand that there is an income gap between agriculture and non-agriculture, which means that majority of India's workforce, as we know, is in agriculture, and they earn very less income and they cannot afford nutritionally adequate diets even when the food is available at subsidized prices. So imagine the condition that people are getting food at rupees 3 or rupees 5 per kg, but still it is so difficult for them to obtain the food even at these subsidized prices. So we can realize that the income that people earn in the agricultural sector is very less. Okay, for them to maintain a healthy lifestyle, it is very less. Then we also have the issue of land equality, and we already have studied it in our previous video of when we were talking about agriculture. So we know that bottom 50% of our households only own 30% of the total land that is available, and we had seen that the top 5 to 10% of the population holds like more than 50% of the land. So we see land inequality, which means that a lot of rural households have no productive asset with them. Productive asset is land, for example, so they can't even cultivate because they don't have their own land, they don't have their own assets, they can't cultivate on this land, or they can't use these assets to generate food or extra income for them so that they can be dependent on it, right? Why undernutrition still persists? Land inequality is a very good answer to it. Okay, then we have gender inequality. Then we say that gender inequality worsens our nutritional outcomes. This means that this is very important to understand. We say that women are the primary caregivers. We know that, right? And food preparers also in our households. Our mothers and all the other women are mostly who prepare the food in all our households, but they still face systematic discrimination. We see that even though they are the primary caregivers, they are the food preparers in the households, but they still have to face discrimination in land rights, right? In owning property, in credit access, they don't get loans easily, they don't get credit easily. They face issue in healthcare and education also. So gender inequality also is a very important factor that aids to or caters to the issue of undernutrition in India, right? Because we say that if women are themselves malnourished and if they are themselves not nutritionally having sufficient food, so how will they give birth to healthy children? They don't. They give birth to low weight children, and their early life already starts being nutritionally compromised. So even at birth the child is already nutritionally compromised, so that just further pushes the possibility of them being nutritionally compromise their entire life. So this is also one of the most important things to consider. Then we talk about what are the reforms that can take place and that can help us to solve the issue of undernutrition in India. So first, like we've already discussed, the diversification of the PDS basket needs to happen because we need to include pulses and millets and other nutritional cereals in our PDS basket, right? Then we can have community food and water banks, and these can be operated by women self help groups. Now this will also give women access to the positions where they can be the decision makers, right? They can help their community. And we can also have a moral principle of storing grain and water everywhere. So community food and water banks can be set up at the rural and urban areas both, and they can be operated by women self-help groups, right? So this also gives women opportunity for employment. Then we have extension of MSP to pulses, millets and oil seeds. If this point is not taken care of, if we don't extend MSP to pulses, millets or oil seeds, then we can't include them in the PDS basket, because food procurement happens at the MSP rate, right? And if a lot of other food other crops are not included under MSP, farmers are not going to produce that. So MSP needs to be extended to all the other crops as well. Then finally we have a point that direct benefit transfer can be an approach, but there is a debate about it, because if we give cash transfers directly to all the beneficiaries, there will be less chances of corruption, right? Because you know that if money is allocated to a particular scheme, there is a chance that there can be leakages, right? And administration might just misuse this particular money. But if we directly transfer it to beneficiaries, they can themselves use it and utilize it for their requirements. But what is the argument against it? That in remote areas and the digitally excluded population, cash does not transfer to food purchase, and inflation can erode the real value of transfers. So if inflation increases, even though you send someone money, but the usage of that money would become very less, because that money would translate to very less money due to inflation. So this can also be one of the issues, right? And PDS provides food certainty that cash cannot guarantee. So we don't know what the people are going to do when we give them cash directly. It might turn out to be good, it might turn out to be bad, we don't know about that. But at least we know that the PDS system for sure guarantees them that they will receive food. So this was the argument that direct benefit transfer could be a good thing or could be a bad thing too. So with this we end our video here, and we have talked about food security and the PDS and NFSA and Manrega Act. In the next video we'll most probably take up MSP, and we'll take up agricultural price policy. So I'll see you in the next video with these topics. I'll share these notes on the Telegram channel, so make sure that you are joined, and you'll find the link in the description box. Thank you.